This video is sponsored by my favorite website creator, Squarespace, the best place to go when you want to get a domain or create a beautiful website or an online store. I think most people, when they think of Sweden, and especially Sweden's politics and culture, picture, extremely high taxes, a socialist background, very feminist, etc. And that's not wrong at all, but what is so mind-boggling to me is that those things, high taxes, socialism, feminism, will to many people sound like a threat to freedom. That those things limit the individual's sense of freedom when it's in fact so completely the other way around, because those things in reality are the prerequisite for a person's sense of freedom. Take it from me, someone who's actually born and raised in Sweden. I understand that you might now be confused and skeptical, so let me try to explain what I mean, because I feel like no one ever talks about this and it makes me a little bit stressed out. Let's start with the taxes, because I feel like this is where most people start to dislike socialism. Sweden has one of the highest tax rates in the world, which might sound like the opposite of freedom, like the state taking a sizable chunk of your income every month. But honestly, let's look at what the effect of that tax rate is in reality for the average Swede, and not least what it has meant personally for me. Okay, so Sweden spends more than 25% of GDP on social welfare, which is again one of the very highest in the world. Because of this, Sweden has free healthcare, generous parental leave, free schools and universities, pensions, unemployment support, great infrastructure, etc., etc. So the quality of your education is not determined by how much money your parents make or where in the country you live. Schools are just as good, the same everywhere. And the minimum wage is set by the trade unions and is also high compared to most countries. So if you work in a supermarket, you will make a decent salary. Almost no one has a second or third job in Sweden, and you don't rely on tips to pay rent. There is a minimum 5 weeks of paid vacation by law, but many employers will offer more than 5 weeks even. And the average Swede works about 1,440 hours per year, compared to the UK's 1,650, or Japan's 1,700, or the US 1,800 hours per year. And let's look at raising children. In Sweden, you have 480 days of paid parental leave to split between the parents. 90 days are reserved for each parent, and the remaining 300 days can be split as the parents please. Or if you're a single parent household, you of course get the full 480 days for one parent. The reason why 90 days is reserved to each parent is to encourage fathers to stay home at least 3 months, but often longer, for the sake of gender equality. Employers often blame the gender pay gap on mothers staying home with children, but if society is built on both parents staying home, this excuse for lower wages for women loses its bite. Then childcare. Here in the UK, childcare is extortionate, with nursery rates landing around £12,400 per year. One of the main reasons that I hear why people are reluctant to have children is because it means such extreme sacrifices for your career and your personal finances. Since most people frankly can't afford to send their children to daycare, especially if living in London, which has such massive living costs as it is. So if you have a child, one parent is often forced to stay home until the child starts school. If you have more than one child, then of course it could mean, pausing your career for 5, 8, 10 years. In Sweden, nursery rates aren't fixed, but based on your income. So for your first child, it costs about £137 per month, or at the most, 3% of your gross income. For the second child, the most 2% of your income, and the third child, 1% of your income. So at the most, you will pay for your first child £1,664 per year, compared to the UK's 12,400 or so. But for low-income households, it will be even less than that. This is to ensure that parents can afford childcare to promote gender equality in the workplace, with both parents being able to work, and to make sure that low-income families will more easily be able to afford having children in the first place. Also, knowing that your child will go on to a good free school and free university later on means it's less of a financial precarity to have children and not having to worry about being able to afford a good life for them. If you want higher education in Sweden, you can just go out and get it. Not only that, but you actually get paid to study in Sweden. Besides from taking a student loan if you want to, you'll get a non-repayable student grant of about £315 a month. That's just for free, for you showing up and cracking those books. So all this means that I've grown up to love paying taxes. I don't come from money. No way would my parents have been able to afford nursery, a great school, a university education, and all the healthcare that I've had over the years without the rest of the Swedish population doing their bit by paying their taxes. I'm not saying everything was perfect growing up in Sweden, of course not, it's not a utopia. There are problems in Sweden just as everywhere else, but growing up I felt three things. Firstly, I felt safe, knowing if I break an arm, it wouldn't break my parents' bank, and knowing that if I happened to be unemployed for a bit, I would get benefits to tide me over. Luckily, I've never been unemployed, but just knowing there is help to get if worst comes to worst is a great stress release. Secondly, I've lived in the very strange world of never having to choose my education or future career based on income prospects. Now, after living in a more capitalist and wealth-gappy society here in London for a decade, I find this so strange to think back on, knowing that whichever career I happen to choose back in Sweden, there will be a decent minimum wage and at least 5 weeks paid vacation each year by law. It has made me not factor in money when choosing education. Basically, the wealth gap is so tiny compared to other countries that both David and I felt free to choose education based on passion instead of future salary. Which is why I studied biology and David studied film production. I mean, my God, no one can accuse us of being financially greedy, can they? Thirdly, another thing that this societal structure has meant for me personally is that growing up in a, relatively speaking, feminist country, with both parents taking parental leave, with both parents sharing household chores and childcare duties, and both parents caring about their work and careers, it has meant that I've never really considered myself female in terms of work or household. It has never even crossed my mind that there are certain careers that would be off limits for me as a woman, or that there are certain behaviors that I need to showcase to be considered sufficiently feminine. Of course there is sexism in Sweden too, obviously there is, but to such a much lesser degree that moving to London was a shock. Again, choosing career and education, choosing whether to have children or not, and my behaviors in my relationship with David, it has nothing to do with gender. Basically, me personally, I have, as a woman coming from a low-income family, felt the freedom and the ability to do just whatever the hell I want with my life. I have not felt kept back by my financial background or my gender once. And I've felt that, I, just as much as a kid from a high-income family, have the right to more or less the exact same quality childhood and future career. Okay, not in terms of expensive sneakers or yearly holidays abroad, but I mean the more important things: financial security, free healthcare and education, the ability to educate myself and build a career of my choice. This is freedom. Having a bit more money left of your salary after paying taxes, with the result of having none of all the things that I've listed safeguarded for all kids, no matter their background, that's not a free society. A free society does what it can to make sure everyone has the possibility to live the life that they choose, no matter your gender, ethnic background, sexuality, or financial background. And again, it's not like Sweden is perfect with all this, but in comparison. This is what we need to strive for, a society of equality and low wealth gaps, where as many people as possible fit into the middle class. We don't need an upper class, we need high minimum wage, fair benefit systems, and an overall stress reduction from people not having to worry about money and about healthcare or about education. What we don't need is a corrupt upper class thinking that they're above the law, and an impoverished lower class that feel that they have so little control over their future that they lose hope. That's a recipe for disaster for any country. We need people who go to work, pay their taxes, and have long, lovely paid vacation to spend with their families. Freedom is not making sure billionaires stay billionaires. Who needs a billionaire? What has a billionaire ever done for you? But okay, I hear what some of you are saying about taxes now, that not all taxes are created equal. Paying taxes in a war-hungry country with a huge military is of course not as thrilling as paying taxes in a country that spends it on childcare and free universities. Also, another reason this has worked as well as it has in Sweden is because there is very little corruption. I think it's the 5th lowest in the world. So for any society to work, we need to create a feeling of trust and goodwill. Basically trusting in the system, in the state, in the government, which isn't easy to do in a country where people have historically been so screwed over by their leaders. This is why I think there should be a strict cap on how much politicians can make. Basically, not a minimum wage, but a maximum wage. And any type of money in politics in forms of donations or funding should be illegal. Money and politics, they do not mix. Anyway, I made a video last year about this fascinating subject, namely the level of trust in different countries and what effect this has on the feeling of the population, as well as how well functioning a society is. So I'll leave a link for you if you're curious. So now I'm wondering, are you with me on this? That freedom must surely mean the maximum amount of freedom for the whole population, not an extreme amount of freedom for the 1%. The 1% are spending huge amounts of money and effort on trying to persuade us otherwise. That is not the wealth gap that's the problem, but the immigrants, or the lack of religion, or trans people for some goddamn reason. It's not the trans people's fault that the US doesn't have free universities. It's not the immigrants saying that minimum wages should be low or childcare costs should be extortionate in the UK. Close the wealth gap and there's enough money to go around, which is again a reason why money and politics should never be allowed to socialize in a democracy. Anyway, these were my 2 pence as usual, and yes, Sweden is great in so many ways, but hey, I've still chosen to live in London for the last decade, because even though Sweden's politics are so much better than the UK's, there are other ways in which Stockholm could never touch London. London is the most thrilling, most handsome city imaginable. I just wish that its politics were saner. But what about your city? Do you recognize your country in how I describe Sweden, or is it the opposite? I'd love to hear your thoughts on all this. I know some of it might be a bit controversial sounding, that, you know, socialism promotes freedom. It's not something that you hear every day, but it's true. What can I say? I felt like completely free to do what I wanted with my life growing up. So even though I grew up without much money, I feel like I've had such a lucky, privileged upbringing, something that I wish for everyone. Now, do you want to create a stunning website or launch your own blog? Squarespace has you covered with its latest innovations. First up, let's talk about their new design intelligence. Combining 20 years of design expertise with cutting-edge AI, this tool helps you unlock your creative potential, building a personalized, one-of-a-kind website that fits your needs. Squarespace also makes running an online store easier with Squarespace Payments. Onboarding is fast and you can start accepting payments in just a few minutes. Plus, it supports various popular payment options like Klarna, Apple Pay, Afterpay and others, giving your customers payment flexibility. And for seamless social media integration, Squarespace allows you to connect your social media accounts in just a few clicks, whether you're embedding a feed or syncing your products directly to Instagram or Facebook. It's an effortless way to expand your reach and keep everything in sync. So what are you waiting for? Go get your free trial today at squarespace.com, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/jennymustard to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Okay, wishing you a lovely week and see you very soon. Bye bye.